Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Okay, sure. Hey guys, original link to the video from Preston Stewart, top of the description. I did subscribe, a like. Trump's final offer. Both sides hate it. Sure, let's go. Let's learn.
To end the war in Ukraine. This is Trump's final offer to end the war in Ukraine. If this isn't accepted, we're walking away. And from the outside looking in, it seems like that decision's already been made, because what has been proposed that we're going to run through in today's video, Ukraine hates it, Russia hates it, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio is skipping out on high-level meetings with his European and Ukrainian counterparts happening right now, designed to talk about bringing an end to this war. So
I know I'm already pausing, but usually when you're trying to make a deal between two parties and neither of them like it, sometimes that can mean it's a pretty fair deal. The problem is, if the USA walks out, that's a win for Putin, you know? And so Putin has the double advantage of trying to get a deal that's good for him, but also if the deal falls through and the US just leaves, then that's a win for him. So, and even saying that publicly is letting Putin know that that's the case. Just not smart.
it just kind of seems like we've made our decision already, which is, you know, similar to what Secretary Rubio, President Trump, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff were saying just last week when they said, we are getting tired of this. It's taking too long. We're not seeing enough progress. If we don't see something happen soon, like in the coming days, maybe weeks, we're out of here. We're going to focus our energy somewhere else. Now, diving into the peace plan here, the details of this provided in some reports by Barack Ravid on Axios. He says this one-page document that the United States presented Ukrainian officials in Paris last week describes President Trump's final offer. The White House insists is ready to walk away if the parties don't make a deal soon. We're going to run through the details of this proposal. He starts out with what Russia gets in this proposal. He says de jure U.S. recognition of Russian control in Crimea. We've got de jure and de facto. De jure is legal. It's what's on paper. So we are going to legally recognize Crimea as Russian. And hey, we get to join, you know, Belarus and Cuba and North Korea in doing that. So that's unfortunate, but that's the first part. We've got de facto recognition of the Russian occupation of nearly all of Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporozhye. So that is talking about on this map here, essentially the orange areas. There's still a little bit of confusion, but this is territory that Russia has taken since 2022. And if you look at, you know, say Zaporozhye here, or even Kherson's a better example, this western portion, west of the river, is part of Kherson. Russia claims it, but this is also part. So it's not clear if they're asking Ukraine to cede some additional territory or if it's only where the lines are right now. My guess is because it says de facto recognition, that means the reality on the ground right now. So we're not saying that legally we view these as Russian territory. We're saying that recognizing the situation as it is, all of this orange and red is now Russian, but not.
But I don't understand that. I think I'm getting better at learning the difference between de facto and de jure, but then I hear stuff like this and I feel like maybe I don't know as much as I thought I did. But so offering these places as like these are Russian now, the purple areas, this part in Donetsk, the eastern Donetsk area, and the southern part of Luhansk, right? And then Crimea. But if de facto is just, it's the reality on the ground, then how could you, what significance does that have in a deal? It's like, so why is that part of a deal? So if these are the places that you're willing to say, I hope I'm understanding this, is going to be Russian and will recognize it as Russian, then this is just the current battle line. Why even say de facto? I always thought that de facto just means, and I guess it does, like if you invade, if say just out of nowhere, just Moldova invades this part of Hungary right here, okay? Right here. And they secure it and they're pretty much in control here after they invaded, then this would be de facto part of Moldova. So de facto just means whether or not you recognize it as my new territory now after I conquered it, I am in control of it, and therefore I'm de facto, this is de facto Moldovan. But when it comes to a deal, How is de facto even relevant? You're just acknowledging that this is where the current battle lines are, you know? I
These little areas up here, we'll come back to that. They say a promise that Ukraine will not become a member of NATO, but it says Ukraine could become a part of the European Union. The lifting of sanctions imposed since 2014, that's a lot. And I wonder if the U.S. even has the authority to offer that, because some of those sanctions are the U.S., but a lot of them are across the European Union. And there's indications recently that not only is the EU thinking about not laying off the sanctions, but maybe adding even more. So, what does it look like if all we do is remove U.S. sanctions? Is that enough to actually get Russia to the table? I don't know.
So in Putin's eyes, these American offers here of lifting American sanctions and de jure recognition of these areas as Russian, to Putin, that's just like, I feel like America is seeing this as like an overall picture, but to Putin, this would just be a way, the war is going to continue, but if you accept this, you'll get America out of it.
And then the fifth one here, enhanced economic cooperation with the United States, particularly in the energy and industrial sectors. So that's a lot of benefits to Russia. And we're going to come back here and kind of give some assessments of each one of these points. In fact, a Russian mill blogger actually runs through one by one saying, I hate it all, and gives reasons why that I thought was pretty interesting. Now, what Ukraine gets under Trump's proposal, so by and large, that's a frozen conflict that stops it moves everything to the current line of contact, no NATO. Let's see what Ukraine gets. They say Ukraine will get a robust security guarantee involving an ad hoc group of European countries and potentially also like-minded non-European countries. The document is vague in terms of how this peacekeeping operation would function and does not mention any U.S. participation. Two words being thrown together there, they're very different. Peacekeeping and security guarantee. Very, very different things. So you would need a peacekeeping force in here. Let's move,
Sorry.
Two words being thrown together there, they're very different. Peacekeeping and security guarantee. Very, very different things. So you would need a peacekeeping force in here. Let's move, here's a great example, right along the river. You're going to need some sort of peacekeeping force to make sure that Russia does not continue to fly drones and strike, quite frankly, a lot of civilian targets in Kherson. There's a whole story there I've been meaning to dive into, but they are hunting civilians down in this area. So you have to make sure that that ceasefire is not violated. Peacekeepers do that. A peacekeeper is not a security guarantee. This would not be, you would not expect multiple divisions of forces lined up throughout here. The security guarantee is to make sure if those peacekeepers say, wait a minute, there's been a violation and Russia is attacking once again. The security guarantee is what comes behind that. NATO is the best example.
So the peacekeepers are essentially lookouts or referees ready to blow the whistle if they see the peacekeeping agreement line violated. I see a few problems with that, but I'll wait a bit.
Right, so if there is a NATO security guarantee here and the peacekeeper said, hey, Russia is advancing again through Donetsk, then NATO would come in and push them back. That's the security guarantee that Ukraine is looking for. Of course, we don't think it probably looks like it's going to be NATO right now, but very different than a peacekeeping force. Additionally, they say Ukraine would receive in return a small part of Kharkiv that Russia has occupied. That's right up here. So this little, Russia kind of referred to this as a bit of a buffer zone. They're going to give that back to Ukraine. Unimpeded passage of the Dnieper River, which runs along the front and parts of southern Ukraine. Not entirely sure. I guess the plan would be that Russia would be able to utilize, this is the river here, running through the central portion of Ukraine. And of course, down here in the south by Kherson, directly, that's the only barrier between Ukrainian and Russian forces. So they want that to be neutral, I guess is the way to put it. Both Ukrainian and Russian vessels could traverse that waterway. Fourth, compensation and assistance for rebuilding. Though the document does not say where the funding will come from. A lot of speculation here, especially on the Russian side, is that would be coming from a lot of the frozen Russian assets that are held abroad right now. A couple other elements of the plan here. They say the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, the largest such facility.
Before we continue, I see a lot of areas where, so NATO isn't, in this agreement that's trying to be sought after, NATO isn't obliged to respond if the peacekeeping force agreement is violated. Say Russia or Ukraine fires into it, or Russia, for the NATO's sake, Russia fires into it, then it's as if Article 5 was enacted. That's not the case. That's what Ukraine would like. The problem here is that I see a lot of areas where you could do false flag, where you only need plausible deniability on the Russian side to say, hey, look, Ukraine shot into us. Maybe they make up their own thing. Maybe they get someone in here to purposely fire into the Russian occupied territory here, or say that like a Russian vessel that was trying to use the Dnieper River was sunk or something, but it was a false flag, and then invade. Well, what will the peacekeeping force say then? Because Russia will just say, well, they broke it. Now it's game on again. It's invasion time. And if you don't have that solid, super intense what's it called? Like eyes on it. Unless you have countries that are super focused 24/7 on seeing if there's any sketchy stuff going on, to see if Russia tries to pull a fast one and do a false flag that gives them excuse to break the agreements, then what happens? Do you know what I mean?
Be coming from a lot of the frozen Russian assets that are held abroad.
Like peacekeeping force, it's great, but how effective is the response going to be if the peacekeeping force blows the whistle and says, hey, Russia violated it? What happens?
Right now. A couple other elements of the plan here. They say the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, the largest such facility in Europe, will be considered a Ukrainian territory, but operated by the United States with electricity supplied both Ukraine and Russia. That's coming in right in, I always mess this up here. I believe it's right in this area here. In fact, let's pull up a different map, see if we can get a
satellite. Yeah.
Yeah, I do believe this is the area of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. Nonetheless, the nuclear power plant right now is actually under Russian control.
Makes sense. A big reservoir here for cooling,
which is going to be important as we move into now is actually under Russian control, which is going to be important as we move into what people like and don't like about this possible deal right now. But before diving into the reactions to this peace plan, which again, everybody hates it, a quick thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Private Internet Access.
I'm going to watch through it. It's up to you guys. If you do watch it with me and you're interested in what he's sponsoring, advertising here, just make sure to use the promo links from Preston Stewart, original links, top of the description. All right, his content, it's only right.
Did you know that even here in the United States, we block access to certain websites from around the world? It's true. Certain government sites and news outlets from various countries can't be accessed from here in the United States unless you have a VPN. A virtual private network hides your IP address and safeguards your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel. This way, it shields what you do online from anyone looking to exploit your private information, like hackers, internet service providers, advertisers, and government censors. I personally recommend Private Internet Access VPN because browsing the internet without a VPN is like going into the fight without a helmet and body armor. All it takes is one stray round and it's going to be a bad day. PIA is the world's most transparent VPN provider with over 30 million downloads. It has a strict no logs policy backed by multiple court cases, which means that it never stores or tracks your data, so your online activity and personal information stay completely private. PIA VPN also helps you get around regional restrictions, so with one click of a button, you can access the content you want no matter where you are. Just pick up a server of 91 countries and 50 states and you're there. Additionally, PIA VPN works on all platforms. You're talking Windows, Mac OS, Android, iOS, and more. And you can use one subscription to protect an unlimited amount of devices at the same time. That's a pretty good setup, but for an even better deal, check out the link in the description for an exclusive 83% off and 4 months free, all with a 30-day money-back guarantee. And of course, thank you to PIA for sponsoring today's video. Also, I should mention that as this deal was announced, Putin supposedly, this was reported by the Financial Times, said that he'd be willing to pause the Russian invasion along the current lines as a part of this deal. So that's the only positive thing we've heard at all from Russia at this point. But remember, we just went over this in yesterday's video. Zelensky has been offering longer ceasefire deals, pretty blanket, hey, just don't attack civilians. And Russia, by and large, has said nope. So not entirely certain that Russia's going to jump on this one, but looking at a couple of the other a couple of the responses.
So this isn't a deal for peace. It's a deal. It's to strike a deal that might allow a future deal.
Here, starting with a statement from President Zelensky. He said, quote, negotiations in London have started, and we are not ruling out any format that could lead to a ceasefire and eventually a real peace. We insist on an immediate, full, and unconditional ceasefire for at least 30 days. Ukraine continues to call for an immediate, full, and unconditional ceasefire. This was the same proposal made by the United States on March 11th. Peace is absolutely possible, but only if Russia chooses to stop the killings. We are also ready for an immediate ceasefire, at least on civilian targets, and we've already declared this. This must be a shared priority with all of our partners. And one of the items being brought up right now is the reason that the United States is frustrated with Ukraine is we're trying to ink this deal and get this done. It's over. We got it taken care of. The war has stopped. Whereas Ukraine is saying, no, let's do a 30-day ceasefire, and that will open the window for us to be able to effectively negotiate a possible end of the war, which was the United States position as of recently. So Ukraine.
But the problem with that is that both sides will see that short ceasefire as a means to think the other side is just building up their forces for another offensive. I could be wrong. What do I know?
Was the United States position as of recently. So Ukraine right now seems to be pushing for what was the U.S. position as of late, and personally, that's probably the best way to do it. At least some sort of temporary ceasefire to actually bring about a long-term, reasonable end to this war in a way that it's not just going to start again in a few months or years. Now, some other feedback from...
The only way to have the ceasefire, though, provoke a more long-term end to the war, then that would require both Russian and Ukrainian agreement on what territory is whose now. Because if either of the parties think, well, there's still some territory in Ukraine that we believe should be part of Russia, and if Ukraine believes there's some territory like in Luhansk and Donetsk and Crimea that is Ukrainian, well, then both sides will see that as a way that no side intends to end the war until they either get back their rightful territory or try to expand their current territory,
Or in a way that it's not just going to start again in a few months or years. Now, some other feedback from Yulia Servydenko, my apologies in the pronunciation, the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine. She said, quote, Ukraine is ready to negotiate but not to surrender. There will be no agreement that hands Russia the stronger foundations it needs to regroup and return with greater violence. A full ceasefire on land, in the air, and at sea is a necessary first step. Our people will not accept a frozen conflict disguised as peace. We will never recognize the occupation of Crimea. And if NATO membership cannot be granted, Ukraine will require binding security guarantees, one strong enough to deter future aggression and clear enough to ensure lasting occupation of Crimea. And if NATO membership cannot be granted, Ukraine will require binding security guarantees, one strong enough to deter future aggression and clear enough to ensure lasting peace.
Well, that would be Article 5 of NATO. Because if that security guarantee does not include being in NATO with Article 5, that means an attack on one is an attack on all, then how is that any different than right now where NATO forces don't get involved, they just send weaponry? Along with her saying we'll never recognize Crimea. If China invaded the USA and they conquered California and Hawaii and Washington and Oregon and Alaska, you're damn right I would never want to say that is Chinese now, right? I'm just trying to make a scenario to kind of put myself in the same shoes. But if you want a long and everlasting peace, you have to. The only way to do that is for both sides to say the territory that each other holds right now is what is legitimately theirs. Now, I don't like that as Russia as the aggressor, and like I said, I would never want to agree to that if I was Ukrainian. I try to use that China on America territory example. Well, then then you're saying it's never an end to the conflict until all Ukrainian territory is back in Ukraine. It's something that I believe is righteous and should happen, but also is not realistic if you're trying to end the war soon. You know? If you guys, by the way, what the hell do I know? If you disagree with me, call me out.
So again, you're seeing a pretty consistent message from Ukraine there. We want a ceasefire. Got to start with a ceasefire. And then, the deputy there draws more demands around NATO membership and Crimea. But I think that's a good pivot over to the Russian view of how this is playing out right now. We got a couple different mill bloggers here that had some interesting assessments. First off, two majors said, quote, the Yankees realized that they had nothing to offer Russia and Kyiv would be stubborn. And in order to avoid being publicly told off by both sides once again, they decided to hold a meeting at a lower level. Talking about Marco Rubio not attending the ongoing meeting in Europe. But by and large, what we're seeing from these Russian mill bloggers is we don't like it, top to bottom. A couple of key examples here. Looking at Crimea, Two Majors says, why is this even on the table? He says this has been irrelevant for 10 years, essentially saying Crimea has legally been Russian for so long. Why do we even think that that's a real consideration? When he talks about the de facto control of all of this territory, again, the Russian view, reiterated by Two Majors here, is that is legally a part of Russia right now.
Okay, but the whole point is that you invaded Ukraine and you took this territory. And you saying that America or some other power, NATO, recognizing some of this conquered territory that you conquered in the past 10 years for this, in Crimea's case, or the past few years in the rest of the de facto Russian territory in Ukraine that they control right now. What are you saying? So are you saying you want the deal to have more territory in Ukraine that you don't currently control to also be handed over? How do you not see the deal in that this thing that has caused so much sanctions and a bad look, to put it lightly, for Russia is not part of the deal? This, again, just kind of shows how Russia is not, it can't be trusted even in these talks.
Like, who are you to think that you can give us something that we already have? The Russian viewpoint. When he talks about cooperation with the United States in the energy and industrial sectors, he says America needs this more. They have a storm baby storm project to supply their industry, which is being returned to the U.S. by Trump. They need cheap energy. That is, all the proposed measures, according to the newspaper, are more in the interest of the United States than Russia and do not meet the interests of Russia. And when he talks about the Ukrainian side and what they're getting, he says the possible assistance for restoration, he says, is likely the $300 billion stolen from Russia. Hard no. He said that's not going to be on the table at all. And then he said the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, he said, why on earth would Russia hand over a nuclear facility to the United States? Like,
okay, so Russia doesn't want an end to this conflict. It's clear.
In what world are they going to do that? A couple of the key comments here from Igor Girkin. Interesting character, right? Russian nationalist. And I do think it's interesting at times to look at some of these Russian perceptions of people that they want to win the war. They want Russia to succeed. They want to take all of Ukraine. And they're just so pissed off with how it's actually playing out. And they're pretty bitter. And sometimes that's kind of fun to see. So Igor Girkin, writing from, I still believe, in some sort of, he's still detained in some sense. Anyways, quote, a wonderful deal. Everyone pays except the United States, which receives dividends without lifting a finger or participating in the war. Naturally, such a deal cannot suit the Russian Federation, even theoretically and remotely. Therefore, all of this is now white noise, demonstrating that the United States did not really intend to concede anything to Russia. So again, pardon my skepticism, but what we've laid out here is not another Russian complaint is, hey, this is the same thing that Witkoff and General Kellogg threw out like a couple months ago. There's no change. Why do you think now it's okay when then it wasn't? It was shot down by Putin long ago. So generally what we're seeing right now is Russia say, thanks, we hate it, we're not going to accept anything. And Ukraine says, cool, we don't need you guys to surrender to Russia for us, is what I'm seeing across a lot of Ukrainian social media channels today. So this is it. This is our final offer, I guess. It really does seem like we're getting tired, getting frustrated with. Personally, I think that the administration thought we had a lot more leverage in this conflict than we actually do. I think I've talked about this before, but I think in the prior administration, a big mistake was made not talking about why Ukraine and their sovereignty is important for the United States. And we spent far too much time on, well, we stand up for democracy and freedom, and we're going to be the good guys and on the right side of history. And like that plays for a little bit, but over time, I think we lost the initiative of being able to explain how the United States protecting the global international order as it is today benefits us.
Right here,
we stand up for democracy, and
right here is what a lot of Americans, okay, will just see as more like, as more. You need to be more direct in what he said later, and that how this affects us. It's not just being the good guy. A lot of Americans are thinking, we don't want to be the good guy. We don't want to be the world police anymore. This all just seems like charity to a lot of Americans, right? And so saying, oh, well, we're on the right side of history, we're the good guy, and world police, and this is what's right. That doesn't ring. A lot of Americans just hear that as spending our dollars on a place on the other side of the world. What needs to happen is making sure Americans know that Russia conquering Ukraine, okay, will mean that you just gave a giant win to our adversary, and it will affect you directly. It's not just the good guy explanation is not a good one to use anymore, okay? Because a lot of Americans just see that as, do we really want to be the good guy if that means spending way more money? You need to show Americans that victory in Ukraine is not just for Ukraine. Victory in Ukraine is not just for Europe. It's for you too. And it will not, forget the police, global police, whatever. It will affect you, and it'll set a new era on the global stage that you could very much either benefit from if you keep helping Ukraine, or what's the opposite of benefit? The opposite of benefit if Russia wins, okay? That needs to be showed, not just this right side of history good guy. That's not going to work anymore, you know?
Freedom, and we're going to be the good guys and on the right side of history. And like that plays for a little bit, but over time, I think we lost the initiative of being able to explain how the United States protecting the global international order as it is today benefits us day in and day out. And we didn't get to that fast enough. Now, what I think we're seeing, again, personal opinion here, is there was so much talk in the campaign trail about how quickly this war could be brought to a close. I think it tricked a lot of people who weren't paying attention to the conflict to think it's just, you just need a different view. Just get somebody that isn't Biden to go in there and tell these guys, hey, enough's enough, you're done. And that would magically stop the fighting. But the issues here are so much deeper than anything we can control from the United States. And I think we're starting to see that permeate throughout some of our senior officials right now, and recognize that maybe we really don't have the leverage we thought we did. But nonetheless, as it says today, this is the final offer by the United States. We'll see if anything actually comes of it. But that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.
Great video. From Preston Stewart. So, in my opinion, the only way that I see the thing I notice throughout this video and learning about this conflict through other videos is that Russia always believes it has the comfortable position of the ball being in the other court, right? And the only way to stop that and change that mentality that the Russians think they can just hit the ball in the other court, it's your move now, it's your move now, is to make a declaration that is very risky for Russia now, which to me would mean taking Ukraine into NATO is such a long process, right? Maybe is there something you can make outside of NATO, or we can help Ukraine with Article 5 without being in NATO, with an Article 5 type? If you go over here, you're at war with NATO now. I think the only way to solve this, or maybe a way to solve this, again, what do I know? Not a lot. Disagree with me. If you think I'm wrong, is to say, Russia, where we agree that this happens, if you attack into it again, you are going to war with NATO. Anything less than that, it is just not going to be taken seriously by Putin, the Kremlin, and the Russians. And That's the only way I can see, is put the ball in Putin's court. He's always just like, because he can count on disunity in NATO, much of which caused by the United States in recent months. And a hard line has to be found. It's like, hey, the ball is in your court now when this agreement is dealt. If you invade, you have to make the decision to go to war with NATO. He always has the mindset that, like, NATO's not going to do this, right? No one's going to defend. You have to be concrete. You are going to war with Europe and the USA and Canada if you break these agreement lines. Anything less than that is allowing him to have the leeway to be like, they're not serious, you know? That's where my mind goes to. I would love to hear your guys' positions. If I said anything you disagree with or was flat out wrong, call me out. I always want to see that. Love your comments. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you guys next video. We'll keep on learning.